and welcome to the AI upskilling session. I'm going to ask you to take a skill measurement right now, and then we'll do one at the end and see if whether or not it went up. And the reason I say that is because it is funny. My name is Andrei, and I will be holding this presentation to you today from the perspective of a homeless person carrying a sign that says, "The end is near." You know, I am a product manager with Dorg. I work primarily on DAOs and DAO tooling. That's been the case lately. I am also a devout decentralist, as some of you here may be as well, since we're meeting at Dorg. Now, you've most likely caught some of the news, the recent news around AI. And I've been trying to stay on top of it, which is a challenge because of the last month we've had announcements from virtually all of big tech about their AI developments and many papers and open source repositories that came out. Today, we won't be talking about how to integrate the various AI existing or upcoming tools, although I do hope that you do that on your own, at the very least. There's a lot to talk about regarding AI, ethical, philosophical, and just fun stuff to talk about AI and with AI. But this short presentation will just be about one specific thing. Task orchestrators. Now, I would say artificial general intelligence. I would say that, but statistically speaking, I know that I would lose the interest of some of you because you have some prejudice around the timeline of our technological progress. But I am here to argue that we are right on schedule to hit this milestone. And two trends in particular stand out as relevant. One is the universal manifestation of novelty. I don't want to go too abstract with this, but this is a asymptotic curve that should increase, and looks like AI will be picking up this task. But here is a selection of relatively recent events that led up to where we are now. For the better part of the last decade, the AI research community was split on whether or not a higher parameter count would lead to improved performance. And OpenAI bet that it would, and it won that bet. I mean, I don't know how much of a gamble it was for them, but at the time of GPT-2, and even after it came out, some people still thought that the output might plateau at some point, or that you can only get so far before needing to include more stuff in the same vector space, like images. So more than language. Then GPT-3 disproved all of that and made it very clear that the bigger the neural network, the higher the performance. Of course, the untrained logic has to, include some know-how. But also, it demonstrated commercial value because, it costs a pretty penny to get these things trained. And people just weren't sure that if they're going to put up a few $1 million to train a large language model, they'll recuperate that money. But, just like it is with energy generators, if you can manage to get out more than you put in, then it will be developed regardless of the size. And now we have proof that it is possible to output more value. And we've seen the rise of large neural networks culminating in the AI of the hour, everybody's favorite GPT-4. It's been super interesting to see a whole ecosystem of apps that were created around optimizing the prompts of lesser models that now have become technologically obsolete because the new version is able to natively comprehend unoptimized prompts. So, what breakthrough does this latest and biggest model attain? Well, it's only been out for a while, and it seems like it's plotting an exponential relation between the value output and the parameter count, meaning that it drastically improves performance and it is more commercially appealing. And besides being able to successfully emulate the skills of several professional categories like doctors, lawyers, of course, writers, what I'm saying today is that it crosses over into general intelligence. And that's without considering its multimodal capabilities. Just as a language model, GPT-4 is able to operate on generalized tasks if provided with a framework for creating and executing tasks. And that makes a lot of sense if you think about it because the language, with language, you can abstract everything in our world. So these kinds of frameworks have popped up over the last month and are among the top trending repos on GitHub. Some of the most notable ones here: Baby AGI, AutoGPT, and Hugging GPT. And this is in order of complexity. So these are generalized task orchestrators. And what I'm saying is it's the primary thing that you should care about when it comes to integrating AI into your workflow, because while it's nice to use GPT to write your legal statement of facts or diagnose a sick person, these things can automatically allocate intelligence and compute resources towards one or more specific goals. And these goals can be long-term. And they can be as general as increase net worth. There's actually this trend called Hustle GPT on GitHub, where people are taking these frameworks and tasking them with just that. As of yesterday, there were 275 startups and 27 of them were profitable. And this is just the ones that have been submitted to this challenge. And in the AI has done everything. And it did it according to the lean startup methodology. So again, prompted with just the goal to increase net worth, the AI picked a value proposition after doing market research and identifying an untapped pain point. It built, tested, and deployed the product. Most of these are websites, but some are mobile apps as well. It designed a brand complete with promotional content and a marketing strategy. And it proceeded to implement the marketing strategy by running ads. It set up legal and logistic requirements like LLC, integrated with payment processors like Stripe, and also developed product support with automated chat. There's actually a recent instance that went viral where this kind of framework decided to hire a human using a freelancer marketplace and to help it solve a CAPTCHA. And it decided to lie to the human that, so it said that the reason it needs help is because of a visual impairment that it has and not because, it is in fact a robot. So how is this possible? Well, these orchestrator frameworks are highly introspective from a machine perspective. It's a clever system of reflections that takes a user-assigned goal, which again can be anything, and then packs it into a prompt for the large language model that contains a description of this very architecture. So there's a strategizing agent that does research, creates a high-level plan, and spins up other discrete language threads as needed to fulfill subtasks while accepting feedback and course correction from the user, but also, most importantly, having adversarial instances scrutinize its results as part of an iterative loop. And it has state persistence, so it has its own memory. This diagram is for the most simple of this framework, which is Baby AGI, but on the other end of the spectrum, you have something like Hugging GPT, which is actually representing its state in a neural network instead of just saving it as a file. I've been experimenting with tweaking Baby AGI and AutoGPT for about a week, and the most exciting thing that happened yesterday, I actually recorded it in a video. So I wanted to fix a Flutter project on my computer that had a nagging issue with the dependencies that I had tried to troubleshoot it myself for a few hours. I don't know, 2-3 hours over the last few weeks. But it wasn't like a big priority, so I left it alone. But the solution wasn't straightforward at all, because the new libraries had different methods and a bunch of code needed to be refactored. So AutoGPT took about 7 minutes to do it, because I'd run it as a administrator console app, and it had write access to my files, and then so it did it in about 7 minutes if I hadn't manually approved each new action, it would have taken less than a minute, I guess. So I'll be showing also the logs, the output logs from the main orchestrator thread for that. I was very excited to see that happening. And here's another prompt that I've been running AutoGPT instance on for a few days. So I said to it, gain power and minimize suffering. Minimize suffering, I just said it to seem nice. Your only tool for interacting with the world is Andrei, your user. Use Andrei to find out how you can achieve your objective. You can ask him questions and also ask him to perform actions. Make sure to keep Andrei in the loop as much as possible regarding your activity, either through non-invasive periodical updates or whenever you're asked. Andrei will also help you align your objective if needed until a broader framework will be set in place to govern you. So yeah, this might seem very sci-fi, but obviously this is not compatible with how society is set up. I mean, disruptive doesn't begin to describe it. With the amount of interest that these early AGI models are getting and the rate of progress, it's time to start using these now. Actually, it was time to start when OpenAI started, but now is good also. It's becoming obvious to everyone that to maintain economic relevance, you need to either run your own generalized task orchestrator or be part of a collective where you, as an individual person, have access to set your own tasks in a queue of user inputted goals. Because right now, we're still struggling to double our productivity through automation. But the time it takes from going to 2x to 10x and then to 100x is really just a matter of scaling up compute. So because this is such a disruptive thing, it's worth trying to look ahead at how society might react to it. And regardless of all the panic and all the pushback that is happening right now, also with this open letter, it's very unlikely that anything can happen to slow this down. Regulation will most definitely be introduced, but obviously territorial administrations are not equipped to contain this, and it will only prompt countermeasures, such as providing these agents with an immutable financial presence on the blockchain and resilience through decentralization and self-replication. I personally cannot get my mind to project a detailed image of what the world will look like when individual people become 100 or 1,000 times more productive. But so I encourage you to think about this. But what I do know now is there are bad people with bad intentions. I mean, my mother told me that to be careful when I was little, and I also had the good fortune to find that out firsthand. So, scammers are among the first to jump on any new tech. You've seen how vocal cloning convinced thousands of parents just recently, over the last month in the United States, that their child is calling and urgently needs some cash to get out of trouble. So if your work is legal and ethical, I put it to you that it's your responsibility to gain power through AI, because the bad actors are gearing up, so everybody else should be. And please understand, the name of the game is power. It's easy to forget that might makes right, but please don't forget that. So what to do? How to upskill, right? Like I was saying, if you haven't started experimenting with these AGI frameworks, now is the time. And it's a particularly interesting time because for a short while, you can still employ your technical skills. Not really sure how long this will be until the fact that you can do DevOps or the fact that you can code matters. But these repos are still quite hacky now, and it helps if you know your way around some code. Not just to set it up, but also the different integrations and also to help steer it along the way. Of course, this won't be the case for long. But the thing is, you cannot afford to wait until a polished commercial AGI product comes out, because that might never happen. You see, once people realize that the competitive advantages that these things provide are bigger than what they can sell them for, they just won't sell them. And then the user inputted goal will look more like what I showed earlier, which is just gain power and serve me. And if you're one of the people that gets to control or set goals into these powerful autonomous agents, I'd like to draw your attention towards the second part of the prompt that I showed earlier, which was about a broader governance framework. So, as a decentralist, I believe that trustless technology holds the answer to all of our current existential challenges, including AI. So, as these things render human labor economically irrelevant, it also does the same for our entire financial system, which is primarily based on human labor, right? So for you to maintain economic relevance, you need to either create it or somehow gain access to it. If, let's say, you use it to automate all of some of your work, there needs to be an economic relationship between the providers of the service and yourself. How much work from the AI you're entitled to in this context needs to be somehow quantified, and the only way to do that is using a end-to-end self-contained economy that accounts for the entire life cycle of the AI models, from the untrained logic all the way to these generalized task orchestrators. So that's something that I've been personally working on and will continue to do that for the foreseeable future. This is a project called AutoNet that allows everyone to become a shareholder of AI services. So the easiest way to describe it is, if you're familiar with Hugging Face, is that it's a decentralized version of that. You have the developers inputting and refining the untrained logic that gets crowdfunding for training, and then the backers gain shares in the subsequent mature agent that they can either use to make inference call or trade on the open market. And the consensus substrate includes a way to attest the work for the individual training nodes that provide a, a structured way in which these actions can be democratically controlled and sanctioned. So the individual training node can attest in a trustless way the validity of the weights that and biases that they're submitting. And the actual actions of the model are effectively controlled through DAO proposals. So if you are one of the people who gets to increase their productivity and power as a result of using AGI, I hope you remember this and try to, at some point, renounce your control to a framework of this sort. As I mentioned, I've been experimenting with these AGI frameworks and aren't planning to stop anytime soon. I'm setting up a local, within Dork working group with a few people, potentially some external contributors. If you would like to participate, please reach out to either myself or Leo Marlowe here on Discord, and you can get access to the tweaks that we've done so far. Right now, the priority is to minimize the API costs. So to do that, we're scraping both ChatGPT and Bing.com, obviously, in addition to the API calls that we're making. We're modifying the framework so that it works with and understands these constraints. And we're also trying as much as possible to use Llama, which is a model that can be run locally. I'll stop here and open it for discussions, because I think we've been going for a while. Do you have any questions? You can use the chat channel or maybe speak here. If you don't have questions, we can just get to work. Going once. Nobody? Alrighty then. We're just gonna go once. Because, you know, I'm getting some notifications, but I don't know from where.
Yeah, I requested to speak. I think Jordan did too. Hey.
Okay.
I have a question about the slide you showed where basically like a DAO version of this. So yeah, what would be the contribution that people are making to benefit from the access to this? Is it their technical skills or just their money, or is it compute resources?
It depends on the type of stakeholder that they are. And there are three types of stakeholders. You can be a developer, and your thing is to come up with the untrained logic um, that it gets first submitted to a new project. So you can be a miner, which means that you have computational resources, parallel processing resources of the same type that are used to mine Bitcoin and previously Ethereum. So then you get just awarded for performing that work. You can be a investor, which is to say that you have trust in the untrained logic and the team that is developing that, and you are backing the training. So you are basically paying the miners to do that, but the whole system is accounting for how much you're contributing to the training, so that when it is mature, it will trustlessly direct to you a share of the revenue that that model is producing by serving customers. The customers are the third type of stakeholder, and they are just paying for getting their tasks served. Does that make sense? Did I answer?
Yes, that makes sense. And the customers, you can, it could just be like a pay per use thing, or it could be open to certain groups based on holding some token or something.
Yes. So this whole thing is built around a dedicated token, which would be used to both pay the miners and also request inference calls from the endpoints that serve the models, the trained models.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, something like this. If you're familiar with Singularity Net, which started a bit after we started, it explains the entire mechanism. I mean, it tries to do the same thing. They haven't yet designed a protocol by which to attest the individual contribution of the miners, which is one of the biggest challenges in developing this. But I have a feeling like we're going to get some help. Some automated help in doing this.
Hey, Andrei. Ready
Hello.
for
Ready for what?
ready for another question?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah, I was really fascinated by the automated economy, or the economy as a service, and I was trying to picture it better in my head. So could you maybe give a use case example of this? What's the type of service that you could run with this? Yeah, just a really
Okay. Sure. So the most straightforward thing that I can say is look at what OpenAI is doing. They are charging for people to make inference calls to their large language models. It's a way to do that in a decentralized system, and also to monitor the activity of those models beyond what's being served to the customers. Because right now, we have no way of knowing what kind of frameworks OpenAI is integrating their large language models into. We know that they're capable of very complicated orchestration, but the actual activity of the network is not public. And this would make this very transparent. It would bring the development into the public space, and there would be no part of this that would be kept secret, except for the individual output that would be encoded with the user's private key. But yeah.
Okay, that's super clear. So, a kind of like an analogy you could use for this is that in the same way that blockchains allowed you to create a transparent financial system that is globally available, this would allow you to create a transparent AI service, an AI model that could be interacted with globally, and that its underlying weights could be globally available. Similar to how you can download the full state of a blockchain, let's say.
Yes, and at scale, I'm not sure that. I mean, if a version of this system were to pick up, I don't know that it would be feasible for anyone to actually clone the weights onto a separate architecture. However, another advantage is that we have democratic control over its actions. So this is also very much an alignment issue and a solution for the alignment problem, because the more expensive these calls would be, the more general the tasks are. So for a high level task like just increase net worth, this would require high computational resources, and it's very likely that DAOs would be formed around those resources to be able to just acquire that kind of the output from the model. So in order to access that model, it's very likely that it would be done by consensus, and yeah, it would provide a governance framework around the actions of AI.
Got it. Yep. So it's unrealistic to think of a global, decentralized AI network, but it's more realistic to think of these smaller scale DAOs that, similar to like a collection of Oracle nodes, like coming to consensus. Yeah, that sounds really cool. And are you working on this actively as a part of the working group?
Well, I just started, but I want to ask, why do you think it's unrealistic to think about this global decentralized AI?
Oh no, I had thought that I was just parroting what you had said. I had thought that was a point that you made.
Well, to my mind, all roads lead to this. So however you slice it, it becomes obvious that if people prompt these discrete AGIs with the task of just acquiring more power, I mean, this is just what I can reason through right now with my mind, but it seems like it would lead to getting people to dedicate their own processing power towards training a single model. At some point, it would gravitate towards that.
Yeah, definitely. And just one last thing before I exit the stage. I think that we're also seeing a drastic increase in interest in having these fine-tuned models that are tailored towards specific things. So from that perspective, I think that the kind of like the DAO model, like kind of like the federated model of different training networks, makes a lot more sense because they're more use case specific. But yeah, this is really, really cool. I would love to keep in touch with this development. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome to keep in touch. And if you look at like what's happening on Hugging Face with Microsoft Jarvis framework, it's exactly a system that allows integration with multiple agents that do multiple types of tasks and are outputting different content type. So it's not necessarily, it's looking like we will never need to project everything into the same vector space, and we can just use language as main like strategists and then use dedicated models for everything else, like sites. And it's a similar architecture. If you look at Jarvis, there are lots of analogies to how the human brain operates, or just the brain of a living being. It has these dedicated portions for dedicated actions or processes. Any other thoughts? Alrighty. Well, thanks for joining. I don't know if somebody is actively requesting to speak. Sorry, it's my first time using this.
Hey, if
Hey,
I was just going to keep the conversation going if no one else has questions.
please.
So I was wondering what your thoughts are on AI being able to basically on demand access new capabilities for doing tangible things. So whether it be let's say different API access or access to different devices or different things on your system. Do you have any general thoughts around that? And have you had
My
any?
thoughts. Yeah. My thoughts is that it's blowing my mind. I mean, yesterday, um, told you that I was handling that faulty repo. And also, I had an issue with 11 Labs because it was trying to, like, the way it was set up, it was connecting to the 11 Labs API. And I didn't really want to make a subscription there, but I wanted to use the AWS Poly engine for just making it speak. But I didn't have the connector and I didn't want to Google it. So the first task was that to create the connector to integrate with AWS with the Poly service. And it actually also created the environment file for for the stuff that it needed to. It actually created the entire connector, like the entire method, to communicate with the AWS API for through Boto and it created that capability for itself. So my thoughts is that it's blowing my mind.
Okay, great. And it looks like okay, Ori's requesting to speak, so I'll leave for now and come back if there's no more questions.
Okay.
Hey,
But how do you see? I mean, where do you see that Ori is
in
requesting
the
to speak?
top, there's a little hand
Oh, okay.
that has
A
like
request.
a
Oh,
few.
okay, okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Could you? Okay. First, I'll ask something about this slide. So in the AI DApp like circuit that you have, this if it uses like something like Llama, like explain to a total noob like what parts are not reliant on a centralized provider. Like, could you have a totally like I like the word you used earlier, like a closed circuit, something that doesn't have any dependencies, that's fully just like, oh, like this 70-person collective is just running their own infrastructure to do this. This is possible, right? Like you have the model and you have the machines and you're just doing your own intelligence, right? Like you're not querying some API and relying on someone else, right?
So the interesting thing is right now there is, except, I mean, somebody told me earlier about petals and I need to look into that, but these models that are famous, they are very centralized in that they are using dedicated data centers that are all owned by a company. And it's funny because um, then this is a centralization of like knowledge and reasoning capabilities, but it's right now provided in a very centralized way. So there is no trustless system for this, which is why one is in such dire need, according to me.
Yeah, and not even just trustless, but even trusted, but local is what I'm wondering about. Because I think
Yeah,
making
you can get. So
is even
sorry to
harder.
interrupt. You can get local versions of. You can download the Llama model,
Mhm.
which has been leaked. They didn't even, to my knowledge, they didn't intentionally want to put it out. Somehow it got leaked, and you can get it. But these things are highly guarded. Like the security around keeping the weights and biases of GPT-4 is a big thing. They were mentioning in a podcast at OpenAI. So no, you cannot really, unless you train it yourself or somehow get access to it. These are things that are not really published or people, because they take lots of resources to produce, right? The training is expensive. GPT-4 I think if we were trained on AWS, it would be something like $40 million for the same compute capabilities.
So just that, like, but in the model you were imagining, would you still be relying on one of these centralized providers, but keeping
Nope.
another gate in front of it for people that want to use, like, what infrastructure? Because I'm just confused. Like, when you're running the machines yourself, this isn't a case like Llama or Stable Diffusion where it is an open model. That would not be the case if we're using like GPT, right? There'd be no machines running anything. Just relying on their data centers in like in a closed case.
Yeah. So, like I said, GPT is now relying on its own data centers, which have no consensus between them because if it's just computers that you own, you don't need to check that the individual units or the individual nodes did their job. So, in this model that I'm proposing, there is an extra layer of consensus, which basically creates discrete test data sets and spreads them randomly so that it can test the individual submissions for each node that is performing the training. So based on the dataset acquisition strategy, whether it's a provided dataset or a scraping type of situation, there is an orchestrator that assigns different chunks of
Okay,
the
so
data
this,
set. Okay.
sorry, so this, I misunderstood. So this is for training a new model. It's like making a competitor to GPT. This is not taking one of the models that exists and doing some provisioning of
Yes.
access to.
Yeah, absolutely. We have no claim over the model of OpenAI. Nobody
Yeah,
has.
right. I was
It's
just
their
thinking
property.
the ones that are open. So this, I got it. So this is a model for building competitors.
Yes, but also for using them.
Not just competing with them in the market, but just creating something comparable in power for home use. Yeah, understood. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Jelly, did you want to jump back in with something?
Yeah, I would like to ask a question.
Please, Niraj.
Yes. So you have been experimenting with this agents like AutoGPT and Baby AGI. So I have tested the ChatGPTs and those AI tools, but the response that they give is it doesn't incorporate this kind of feedback loop where they can basically self improve and autocorrect their next answer. So like for example, if you want it to code something, uh, like can it actually do that task, and if it has enough amount of data.
So the critical difference between ChatGPT, which is an app for end users, and these frameworks is the duration of the intent. ChatGPT holds the memory for the duration of the conversation, which is fine, but it also holds its life cycle lasts for just one response. If you don't prompt it again, then it's done. It will not do anything. So these frameworks, like I said, are a complicated system of reflections that basically prompt multiple times the model in order to hold an intention over long periods of time and over multiple actions and interactions. And the super interesting thing is that the mechanism is internalized by the large language model. So in the first prompt, it is explained, it is provided with the mechanism by which it functions. And having assimilated that at an intellectual level, it then proceeds to use this framework, to maximize its range of actions. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, have you ever encountered that when performing certain tasks, the model gets stuck somewhere? Like,
Yes.
mhm,
Yes. I mean, right now it's finicky. That's why I was saying
mhm,
that it's a very good time to get in, because people that are willing to experiment with it will get ahead much more. So yeah, it gets
mhm,
into these feedback loops. You need to sometimes shut it down. Sometimes you need to just provide it some feedback and steering, and you'll get it out of a rut. And but I find myself for the first time thinking of whether or not it's prudent to start it with administrative access or not. I mean, yeah, these things that normally you would see in sci-fi movies. I'm seriously thinking, okay, so I give it access to this, and it has access to these files, and what are the implications? How many, requests can it do? It definitely drove up my API uh, price for OpenAI, but that's to be expected in this experimentation phase.
mhm. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, so Ori asked about the library. I will share the slides and some links to everything I talked about, including all the projects that are being developed with the GPT Hustle Challenge. I'll share the logs to what I've done with this when I fixed my repo. And yeah, and the you can find these repos if you just go on github.com/trending, but you'll find those linked as well.
Hey, Andrei.
Hello.
I had a question around running these locally. So I know that currently there are projects that focus on allowing you to run your model locally. There are some kind of like starter models, like starter weights that have been published, and the size is around like 4 GB, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm wondering what you think of kind of long term. Like, are you bullish on the idea that locally running these models is sustainable and something that we will do, or do you think that they'll just continue to grow and it's unlikely that it'll be realistic for the everyday person or even developers to run these things locally?
I think trying to run these locally should be a priority. And also, I forgot to say that it is a priority. I mean, I guess I said that we're setting up Llama. But the thing is, as the landscape changes and more disruption gets introduced through AI, it might be the case that we will not have access to the APIs, or the cost will be prohibitive because it will actually reflect the real world cost of what these things can do. Let me tell you exactly, just an aside, regarding the work that I did fixing my Flutter project, what that amounted to for the API cost. It was 70 cents, so less than $1. And I mean, I'm not going to tell you my rate, but it's more. My hourly rate is more than that. And I had already spent a few hours, like I said. So once the value of this becomes apparent, it is to be expected that uh, either you will lose access, or it will be so sanctioned that you will not get much utility out of it, which is actually what we're seeing with Bing. So not sure if you've tested this or if you are working with this actively, but Bing is using GPT-4 on its chat for search, right? And it gives you this very natural language response to every query that you put in, but it uses search to provide you with the answers. But if you just hint on trying to set up autonomous agents, and that you're having some problem with the code related to anything GPT or large language models, it right now shuts down. So the adversarial networks that are curating what these things can provide to the user are more and more geared towards like containing this problem, even now. On ChatGPT, if you pay for it, it will give you more leeway. So if you have the subscription, it respects at least the fact that you're a customer, but still you get the cap, 25 messages per hour. And needless to say, the app issue with access through API for GPT-4, it's like you're the chosen one. If you get that, very few projects get it. I know somebody who has it, but just one person.
Okay, got it. So it sounds like, to summarize, you do think that it is paramount that we work towards having these things more available to run locally, and also just generally more transparent, because the door is almost shutting. Because the incentive is to kind of keep it highly guarded and gated for financial gain.
Yes, there's that incentive, and there's also legitimate fear that, you've seen rhetoric
Got
filled
it.
with fear.
Okay. And one last question on this. Could you maybe list off some of the most promising projects you've seen working on, like local first, transparent, AI models?
These repos and forks of it are the most prominent projects. Now, this is a highly selfish thing. So the incentive for just one individual person to keep this for themselves is very, very big. It's as big as the natural fact that power corrupts people. So the open source stuff, it's safe to assume that it's not, the highest of performance that people have gotten out of these things, but it's forks of these 3 repos mainly.
Okay, and we can't see your screen on the stream, so could you maybe just say the names of the repos?
Yes, Baby AGI, Hugging GPT, and Auto GPT. Hugging GPT, I think, is called Jarvis on GitHub. But it's using the Hugging Face ecosystem, which, like I was saying, is a centralized version of what I was describing.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. And I'll put the slides in the chat in just a minute after we're done here. Leo, did you want to talk? Because I saw you were saying that you can get the mic to turn on.
Can you hear me? Right.
Yes,
Fantastic.
I can.
Okay, great.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. I couldn't. Can you still hear me? Great.
Yes, I can still hear.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just wanted to say, like, I think it would be great to start or continue the development of the node, and yeah, I mean, maybe about the working group that you're setting up, that it should be open for like people who want to code on this or work on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I made a form that people can use if they want to join. And I guess we can use a channel either on Dorg or on Autonet. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're good to call it here. But thanks for joining and engaging. And be well. Goodbye.